I don't know about you, but I think most artists are overthinkers and we're highly critical of our own work.
You can say to yourself, now I'm free to do whatever I want.
I had to have a designer friend of mine come and look at them all and give me a suggestion.
If we can just step aside and say art is bigger than just the product I make. Art is more about the way that I make people feel.
I think that might be one of the reasons why I enjoy doing the wall plates so much.
It's important to get feedback from knowledgeable people as opposed to like your clients exclusively. I just cannot abide by that. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever the case may be in your particular situation. I'm Scott Markowitz from Reinvention Studio Lab, and I'm joined here with Shiree Ingram from Shiree, Nichole Designer Finishes, LLC.
Yes.
And today we're going to be talking about a very special thing. It's about being a critic, but not just any critic, how to be your own critic. Shiree, that's very important when you're a professional artist. Wouldn't you agree?
I think so. For me personally, it's something that has developed over time. I don't know about you, but I think most artists are overthinkers and we're highly critical of our own work. And it's something I've had to learn over time, especially in the beginning of my career. I was very critical, especially decorative finishes, wall finishes. And so I would get started on a wall and I wouldn't even finish it. I didn't like halfway through it or even 3/4 of the way through it. And I'd throw everything down and let it dry and repaint it and start again. And I don't do that anymore because I realize that it might just be that I'm frustrated with the application. Maybe it's moving a little bit harder than I expected. The flow doesn't seem quite right, but it's just more of a physical thing for me. So if I just go ahead and finish the wall and then wait and look at it the next day or a few days later, and I'll look at it and I'm wondering why I was upset in the first place. And I'm so glad I went ahead and finished the wall. And my husband actually helped me to not be so critical of my own work. And he tried to explain to me that I see things that no one else ever sees in their own artwork. How about you?
Yeah, looking at your own work with a critical eye, there's so many different facets to that. Because on the one hand, you have to look at it as the artist. Mm-hmm. But I feel like another responsibility that you have is to look at it as the client as well.
Right.
And to be able to make that distinction in your own mind. So yeah, for me, when I'm looking at my work, I am usually very critical when I'm wearing the artist hat. But then when I make the decision, I should say, to step back and look at it as the client, I'm able to really look at it from the standpoint of saying to myself, okay, does this meet the artistic brief? Does this meet the criteria? Does this fulfill their need? And I should also make the distinction that the kind of art that I do is very different than the kind of art that you do.
Right.
Right? Because my art is video production, photography. It's meant to be consumed in a different way and for different purposes. The things that I'm doing is being done as a promotional tool usually for my clients, and it's being used for marketing purposes. And so the need and the direction needs to be from the standpoint of, does this help sell the client's product or service? As opposed to yours, does this make my living space more beautiful? Does this make my life better by, being surrounded by this artwork? So it's an interesting question coming from me versus from you, I think. Mm-hmm. And I can be super critical of my own work, and I am. And there's very rare occasions where I deliver a piece for a client where I don't think to myself, oh, I could have done this or that better. But at the same time, I'm very confident that I've knocked it out of the park in terms of what their expectations are and what their needs are. I would never deliver a product that I didn't think was serving the purpose of having their marketing needs fulfilled. Right? Just like you would never turn over a project to somebody that you didn't think you did 100% for.
That probably helps you to grow and hone your skills very distinctively to just become better and better at what you do. Over the years, I've realized that what is most important about the faux painting or decorative finishes side of it is that my client's opinion is the one that matters the most, not mine. I don't live in their home. And if they like it, that's really all that I really need to focus on. And I've noticed with myself, I do see things like my husband said that other people just do not see. And the client doesn't know about your emotional struggle that you've had with the finish or anything like that. They don't see that
Right.
when they look at it. And I notice like a lot of times where I might think the texture maybe looks maybe a little too heavy, maybe even a little messy, and I'm trying to fix it, but that's what they like the best about the finish. So I think becoming my own critic has been a process of me listening to feedback from other people that I've worked with and clients, and just to always keep that in mind that their opinion is the one that matters the most. And so that I think that helps with my own personal things. It takes me a lot to finish, unfortunately, projects for myself because I don't know why, it just does. I way overthink. I had this really beautiful dining table that is made of travertine, and I had these chairs that I faux painted two of them, two different types of faux, and then straight painted one. So it took me probably 4 or 5 years to finally pick what finish I wanted, and I had to have a designer friend of mine come and look at them all and give me a suggestion. So I ended up not faux painting any of the chairs and straight painting them all one color. I was way overthinking it and too picky about the chairs, so I never completed the project. Therefore, it just took me that long to do it.
Yeah. And something that you said made me think a little bit. You were talking about getting feedback from others, and I think that is really a crucial step in learning how to become your own critic, is observing people who are knowledgeable, right? Because it's important to get feedback from knowledgeable people as opposed to like your clients exclusively.
That's true.
Right?
That helps. Yeah.
Yeah, because your clients, they may not be able to articulate why they like or dislike something.
True.
But somebody who's knowledgeable about the art and the process of what you're doing and can articulate that in the artistic terms is much more valuable. So if you're able early on to learn how other knowledgeable people see your work and react to it, then that will help train you to be a better self-critic. And it's easier said than done because there's that emotional aspect, like you mentioned earlier, to it. You've put so much into it. There's been so many things that have developed within your own mind as you're creating the work. And it's sometimes hard to separate the emotional aspect of what you've done with the material aspect of this is something that I've created, yes, but it's external to me. And it's not necessarily reflective of who I am as a person. Yeah, it's a trick to be able to extrapolate those pieces from somebody else that's looking at your work critically and saying, okay, this from them is valuable because it speaks directly to the actual art piece. This coming from them is not valuable because they're talking about me as a person, and that's really not relevant. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes, it does make sense. I think one of the things that helped me early on to try to separate my emotions from, in particular, art pieces. And when I started doing abstract art, that was something I had a real hard time letting other people see my abstract art because it wasn't taking references from anything physical. It's something you have in your head and you're putting that on canvas, and then you realize, oh my goodness, how these people are going to see what's going on in my brain and they're going to think I'm nuts. So I think that for me, for abstract art, that was one of the most challenging things I did. for years that I never really showed anybody. And then you talked about the importance of having those that are knowledgeable about the same type of work. And so a really wonderful designer here in Naples, Dominique Finet from France, I had done a lot of faux painting with her, but she also has just a great eye for abstract art. And so I asked her to critique, if she would, some of my abstract pieces. And she did. She gave me a lot of great, helpful suggestions. And what was cool about that, that was in 2008, I believe, and the economy, just was a mess during that time. And I ended up doing 12 commission pieces for her for one client. And so I had to get over a lot of my fear of having that put out there, but also not being so overly critical of myself. But also, I think it's important for us to be humble and to listen to what a valuable critic has to tell you and make those changes. And a lot of artists have a really hard time making those changes because they created the art, they have an emotional attachment to it, they're not changing it because that's how they created it and that's the way they want it to be, but then their art sits there and it doesn't sell. And so if you just listen a little bit to some positive feedback, make a few changes, and then all of a sudden then your artwork can sell, because somebody being willing to listen and be willing to accept a little feedback and counsel. Don't let your pride get in the way. But a lot of artists do have that problem, that there is such an emotional connection with the art. And I do personally, I have several pieces that I've created that I will never get rid of because I do have an emotional connection to them and they're mine. I'm not selling them.
Oh, that makes perfect sense. I think that will sometimes dovetail into a different conversation, even the difference between art and craft. I have to remind myself that I'm not making a major motion picture when I'm working with my clients, right? I may have some ideas about something that could be a little bit more artistically done or more beautifully elaborated on using the tools of cinematography and light and manipulating things or even augmenting things in post-production with visual effects. But I have to remind myself sometimes that it's the craft of creating a marketing piece that speaks to the end user on behalf of my client, as opposed to me trying to express myself artistically through this one piece of video. Right? So there's a time and place for me to more develop my artistic muscles or to express them. And there's a more appropriate time for me to just simply stick to the craft of making marketing pieces. Right?
Do you feel that your photography gives you the opportunity to display your artistry more and that the videography is more of the craft?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that has drawn me to the type of practice that I've developed. When I first started my company, I had the choice to stick to one particular type of offering. But I decided to be a little bit more general and offer like a broader range of offerings, from photography to video production to podcast production to all kinds of different things for marketing media purposes. And I do find that the photography is the most satisfying for me to be artistically expressive, because there's so much care that can be taken in a still image that can be appreciated by the client as well. Right? So that's one of the things that attracted me to creating my own type of business, as opposed to following what a lot of the gurus were telling me back during the pandemic when I got laid off from my full-time job. And I looked for answers about how do I start my own company. And like everybody and their brother was saying, you got to niche down to a very specific kind of video or photography practice. You have to pick one lane and stick to it. And that never appealed to me. Like I fought against that from the very beginning. And I even signed up for coaching programs by some of these folks, and I would argue with them about that. I'm like, I understand that it's good to have a specific niche and a very specific offer when it comes to like my materials to reach out and market my own business. That makes sense to me. But in terms of satisfying my own artistic needs, that is complete rubbish. I just cannot abide by that. And they would fight with me, and they're like, no, you have to pick, like, you have to either do just real estate photography, or you just have to do architectural photography, or you just have to do commercial video, and you have to pick. And 4 years later, I can proudly say that's not true. You don't have to pick. Would it have been easier? Yes.
Less stress.
It would have been less stress. It would have been less work, but I would not have been as happy. I would have been more rested, but I would not have been as happy.
That's funny. You mentioned about pick a lane and stay in it, and I've struggled with that. Actually, going back to the abstract art, I think that's where I also was struggling with making a decision about that too. And so I was reading a lot of books. I was asking other designers that I worked with. So just in the decorative wall coverings, that has so many different things that you can do. But if I was going to become known as an abstract artist, although I did a lot of different artwork, should I just stick with the abstract art, and should I just look like the same colors and always be the same in my style, so that people they see a painting, they recognize that, oh, that I did that painting. And I quite honestly couldn't bring myself to do it. I don't like being pigeonholed into anything. I think actually the thought of it makes me mad. And I had so many differing thoughts on that. So the French designer, she was supportive, express yourself in any way you want, very open to me doing all different types of artwork. And then another designer that I had worked for years, she did not want me to present any of my abstract art to her clientele, because she didn't want them to know that I actually did art on canvas. She wanted me to only be decorative art for her, and she said it would be confusing to her clientele. And then another designer, I brought that whole scenario up to her, and that's ridiculous and very small-minded. And so it was interesting. You have all these three very successful designers with very differing opinions. Isn't that what art's supposed to be? You're supposed to be free to express yourself in any way that you want. Why should you have to pick one thing and stick with it?
Yes, I totally agree, Shiree. So this is what I would say to folks that are interested in maybe expanding, going out of lane a little bit. If you can think about it from a slightly different point of view, it's not like completely throwing away the tried and true business sense of picking a lane and sticking to it and niching down, but it's shifting things a little bit. If we can just step aside and say art is bigger than just the product I make. Mm-hmm. Art is more about the way that I make people feel. And then you can say to yourself, now I'm free to do whatever I want with the materials and with the end result, as long as I get the person on the other end to feel the way I want them to feel. Mm-hmm. And I think that is like a very empowering way to look at it. And I would say that to all the past teachers that I had that argued with me, is that, I'm still adhering to their advice in a way.
I actually had this conversation recently, last week, with another artist here in Naples, Tracy, that owns Taveri Designs. And she's very successful here in Naples, does abstract art, but has this amazing clay pottery background. And it was interesting because we've been on social media for I don't even know how long, following each other and admiring each other's work, but we had never met in person. And so I went to her home and we had a great time and got to see her studio. And I asked if when she looks at my social media, does it just look like I am somebody with really bad ADHD? Because I have all these, I'm doing glass beads, then I got murals, and then I'm doing wall plates, and then you have abstract art, and then I have very soft, subtle pastel art, and I feel like maybe it's just too much and I'm all over the board, and are people confused as to what it is that I'm really doing? And she said no, she didn't feel that way at all about it. So it was nice to hear her input, although she is a fellow artist and she herself is in different avenues too.
Right.
So I have wondered about that. But a lot of the things that I do have come about because of simply being asked to do them. And so I've learned that's how wall plates came about, matching wall plates. Somebody asked me one day to do them at their house, and I'd never done them before. And I just said, sure, yeah.
Yeah.
I can do that. And so, and now that's become, if seriously, if I could retire just doing wall plates, I would, I would love it. I am like obsessed with doing wall plates. It's something I thoroughly enjoy. And I think maybe one of the reasons why I enjoy it so much is going back to this idea of freedom as an artist, because yes, it needs to match and it needs to look like the stone or the granite, but every single one of them, even on the same type of granite, is completely different. And I do have some artistic license, and I add in, I have to think about the structure of it and add in the texture, and that gives me more freedom. Whereas when they pick a wall finish, what they see on the sample board is what I have to recreate on their wall, and I can't have any further artistic expression on that. It needs to look like that.
Yeah.
So I think that might be one of the reasons why I enjoy doing the wall plates so much.
Definitely. So it's funny that we've diverted a little bit from the original topic, but I think this is definitely going to be its own podcast episode, talking about being a generalist versus being a niche and sticking to one thing. But it is important to understand how other people see your work, and to learn to be critical of your work so that you can deliver the very best. I think that's what we're really trying to say here, is that the process of delivering your very best has to include some steps of evaluation. And you can't always rely on other people to evaluate your work, nor should you. As a professional artist, you need to be able to develop your own ability to critically look at your work and make sure that you're delivering what you should be delivering, right? And it is a skill, and it's not always the most fun thing to learn, because it involves looking at your products and saying it can do better, or it should be better.
Yeah.
So, yeah, what's your final take on being your own critic?
I think there's just a lot that goes into being self-critiquing. I think you can do a lot of research too. I look at other artists' finishes compared to my own. Maybe some days are just off, and if you do realize, you know what, this wall could look better. And separate the homeowner may like that, but maybe I don't like it for other reasons. And so just go ahead and repaint it, redo it, just because it makes me feel that in my heart, I can say I did my very best. And so sometimes that does happen. Sometimes I am being too overly critical. So I have learned, I think the best thing for me to do is to step away for a few hours, step away for a few days, revisit, because it just may be the mental state that I'm currently in causing me to be so critical, and that if I revisit it, there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it's an ongoing process, but I feel like I'm a little bit more adjusted at being my own self-critic now than I was 20 years ago.
Yeah, and the last thing I would like to add, Shiree, is just to leapfrog over something you just said, and learning how to view other people's work to help guide your self-criticism. I think that is very valuable, as long as you're careful not to allow yourself to feel bad about yourself when you compare yourself to other people's work, because the only person you're ever really in competition with is yourself, and other artists they're doing their own thing. They're not out there to make you feel bad, so you shouldn't compare yourself to them and say, oh, I wish I was as good as them or whatever. You can only improve on who you currently are at that moment. So it's important to keep that in mind.
Right.
All right, Shiree, where can people find you if they're interested in learning more about your business and how you can help coach them start their own?
The best place is the website, ShireeNichole.com. That's ShireeNichole.com. And there's a separate coaching There's a free course on glass beads, and we have more coming too.
That's right. That's ShireeNichole.com. Don't forget the H in Nichole. That's HireeNichole.com. And of course, you can reach me at reinventionstudiolab.com. That's the best place to see what I'm up to. And there's plenty of opportunities to get coached up from me and the folks at Reinvention Studio Lab. So yeah, give me a holler. And Shiree, that's all there is for everybody out there. Keep on creating and rock on.